right, hello and welcome. My name is John Golden from Pipeliner CRM and SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Mike Bosworth. Morning, Mike.
Good morning. How are you, John?
Good. And for those of you who don't know Mike, and I'm sure that's only very few of you, Mike was the original creator of the solution selling framework back in the 80s, and he co-founded Story Leaders in the 2008, and then 2013, the Mike Bosworth Leadership, where he does keynotes, he writes books, he provides workshops, and he really helps people to basically become better at selling. And one of the things that I really wanted to focus in on today, Mike, is this whole concept of storytelling. Tell me a little bit about that and how you came upon that.
Well, back when I first became a sales trainer at Xerox in 1976, they actually said to me, Mike, we can teach salespeople how to be competent, but we can't really teach them how to connect. We can't teach the rapport. That's chemistry. The chemistry between two people is unique. So I took that, and for my solution selling years and my customer-centric selling years, we were teaching salespeople to be competent. We were giving them diagnostic questions written by the smartest people in the company. The whole idea was, and I did make an error, but it took me until 2008 to realize it. But when I first put together solution selling, I thought, when you go to a doctor for the first time, a doctor you've never seen before, how does that doctor lead you to the emotional conclusion that they are really competent? How do they do that? They do it by asking you intelligent questions you're capable of answering. Excelling is we have the smartest people in the company write these discovery questions that are so good that the idea was the buyer would conclude the seller is competent. Well, here's where I went wrong, and my intellectual arrogance over the years caused me to not really hit this problem the way it should have been hit. Mm-hmm. And finally, in 2008, I saw statistical evidence from Sales Benchmark Index that the old 80-20 paradigm I got introduced to at Xerox in 1979, which is 20% of the salespeople bring in 80% of the money. Mm-hmm. In 2008, I found out it had gotten worse. It was 87-13. And I said, I felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach. Mm-hmm. The best got better, the worst got worse. And so I kind of hit the wall, and I said, I'm missing something. Mm-hmm. And just within the same amount of time, within about 30 days, I got exposed to story. And this guy named James Mayfield Smith, he was a Midwest guy who made a bunch of money in high tech. He decided to take a sabbatical to New York City.
Right.
And for 2 years, he studied story, applied mythology. Mm. And then when he got his degree, he started calling all the sales training companies saying, you need to add storytelling to your curriculum.
Right.
And one of the things that I teach salespeople is you can never tell a buyer what they need. Mm-hmm. So most of those people said, no, we don't. And they hung up on him. But I had just had this crisis. And so I opened my mind and I said, talk to me. The conclusion is that the top 20%, what they do intuitively that the bottom 80% does not do is connect at a human emotion level.
Right. People do things intuitively. It doesn't mean they do it consciously, right?
If you only do it intuitively, you can't teach it to the salespeople that work for you that need the coaching. Mm-hmm. So even though they can say, let me come out with you and make the call with you, mm-hmm. or watch me sell, but they don't know the intuitive. They can't teach the intuitive part because it's intuitive.
Exactly. So when you work with people on storytelling, how do you guide them so that they don't just end up rambling, right? Because there's a difference.
It's a great question. Yeah. It's a great question. In order for storytelling to work, it's got to be part of your sales strategy. Mm-hmm. It can't just be a technique. So on the marketing side, has our company defined the personas we want our salespeople to have intelligent conversations with, right? Buyer personas. Back when I sold manufacturing systems for Xerox in the 70s, my buyer personas were materials manager, VP manufacturer, CFO, IT manager, right? You knew 90% of the time you were going to have an intelligent conversation with each of those job titles, those buyer personas, about a problem they have that you know you've got the solution for in your pocket.
Right.
All right. In other words, we want to target people who should be looking at our stuff.
Right.
And then we rely on pure curiosity. Like if I were riding an airplane with you,
yeah,
and I said, John, what do you do? What would your answer be?
I would say I work for a CRM company.
And I go, really? I say, can I tell you a quick story about another guy I know who works for a CRM company?
I'd say, sure.
Sure. I've never in my whole life had somebody turn down a peer story. So when I was a 28-year-old selling to 48-year-olds, I wasn't coming off with my knowledge that, Xerox gave me is I'm a 28-year-old salesperson and I'm going to tell you how to run your manufacturing plant better. They would never have taken that from me. But if I said, oh, you're the materials manager, can I share a story with you about another materials manager? 100% of them said yes. And then I had a story that would lead them to the conclusion that even though I'm 28, I understand how hard his job is.
Right.
And I lead them to the conclusion that I've got some character and I'm not going to hustle him.
Right.
So that's going to be built into my story.
So a huge part of it, I guess, then is the fact that it resonates, right? As you said, you come with a peer story and you really show them that, I mean, obviously you're the sales guy, but you show them that you understand what it's like to be in their shoes because you've worked with other people who are in their shoes and you've understood and you've helped them.
Boom. And at the end of 90 seconds, not only does that person think you're potentially trustworthy, but they have hope for a solution to a problem that they hadn't figured out how to solve before. And they have a little peer envy because one of their peers has already been smart enough to solve that problem and they haven't solved it yet.
Right.
So it's really initiating a buy cycle using a story.
Right. So why do more people not use storytelling?
Everybody tells stories. We go around the table in our workshops and we say, give me your name when you introduce yourself and tell us the name of a story you teach and you tell in your private life. And most people say, well, on all my kids' birthdays, here's a little story I tell. Or here's a story I tell at Thanksgiving. Or I was out golfing last Saturday and here's a story I told my buddy, right? But most people don't do it consciously, where we know the elements of a story should be a setting and a struggle and an insight, an aha moment and a resolution. So, and they have to be emotional, which means they have to have a hero, right? So most companies' stories, when salespeople are telling stories about their companies, they quickly fall on deaf ears because they're using the pronoun we.
Yeah.
We were founded in 1982 and we had strong, steady, controlled growth and we're a leader today, But there's no human connection with the pronoun we.
Right, absolutely.
So IBM, back in the 60s, they had this down. They'd say, we were founded by Thomas Watson and he was this guy and this guy and this guy. And boy, he struggled and he had to borrow and he did this. And so the story of their company was the story of their first leader. And then he retired and they brought the second one on. And IBM used to nail that company's story because it wasn't we, it was Thomas Watson. And here was where he wanted to go. And then this guy took over and Ross Perot, So
part of the issue is, from what you're saying, is that while people maybe tell stories, and they may be used to telling, and they may even tell stories in their sales process today. What they don't understand is almost the narrative arc or the construct of how to tell a story that resonates as opposed to something that's mildly interesting or maybe not interesting at all.
The other thing is there's a basic inventory of 3 types of stories that every salespeople has to have in their pocket. The first one's the story of their company, the one that I just described at IBM. The second story, and they're not going to use this story on the first sales call, is their personal story of why they do what they do. Mm-hmm. Because human beings want to buy from other human beings.
Right.
And so one of the hardest stories we have to teach these salespeople is their who am I story. Mm-hmm. So they finally get to go to dinner with lunch with a prospect, and now there's some more trust, and they say, where'd you grow up? And you got your who am I story choreographed with an arc, leading them to the conclusion that you have character. Because, you've made mistakes, but you've been man enough to admit them, and you took the time to figure out why you made it, and so you didn't make it again, mm-hmm. and that, at one point in time you had trouble working on a team, and you had to do this and this and this in order to do it, but now you love working on a team. So you want to show them that you've hit some potholes, but that you've had the character to learn from them and be coached and take feedback and be vulnerable and all that. Mm-hmm. Most men don't do that very well on their own, John.
Sure.
The women take to it just like this. Uh-huh. But the men have been taught growing up, don't be a wimp. We're not crying around here, where, they end up not being nearly as able as females to communicate at an emotional level.
So let me just come back briefly to something that you talked about earlier, and that's the authenticity, right? Do you think, because there's been so many different, say, sales methodologies and ways of selling, and people are getting bombarded all the time with all of these, that it's becoming harder, or people are using them as crutches, so it's becoming harder and harder for people to really be authentic, right? Because they think, well, I need to latch on to this latest, sales approach, without thinking about how do I relate personally to what you're just talking about? So has authenticity, is that a harder thing, do you think, nowadays, because people are running after silver bullets all the time?
They've been running after silver bullets forever. Mm-hmm. And one of the worst things you can do as a salesperson is use a word or a phrase that the buyers heard from 10 other salespeople.
Right.
Okay? So as soon as something gets to be mainstream, I tell people, you don't want to remind them of any other salespeople. So we really have to teach them. And, some people have a sense of humor, which makes it much easier.
Sure.
But that breaking the ice it's critical. And sometimes you have to break that ice with a stranger before you can even offer them in 10 seconds that offer of a pure story. The breaking of the ice has to come first. Yeah. And, Chevy Chase, remember? Did you ever see him on Saturday Night Live? See him when he walked into a door? All right, he made himself human.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And there was this guy at Xerox years ago who majored in psychology. He was a technology salesperson, but he used to do psychology experiments at his kids' school functions. He had 5 kids, and so there's always, back to school night and teachers and plays and stuff like that. And so multiple times a year, he'd find himself in a room full of strangers, except we all had one thing in common, which is our kids go to that school.
Right.
All right. So he'd wander around just listening. And what do you think he was picking up? Oh, mine got into Brown. Mine's going to be playing lacrosse at Johns Hopkins next year. Mine just got a music fellowship at Berkeley School of Music. They're all having a contest to see who's got the coolest kid. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what he would do, And he had a very naturally, kind of sad face and his mouth turned down. And he was a funny looking guy. It looked like he had a toupee on, even though it was really his own hair. Anyway. So he'd go up and say, my name's Bob, and I've got 5 kids, 1 of each. And he'd see if they'd even catch that. And then he'd say, boy, my first 4 are doing great. 2 are out of school. This one's got this job. This one's got this job. These 2 are in school doing great grades. But my number 5 is breaking my heart. She got picked up for shoplifting last Saturday. And I think I'm going to have to put her in rehab. Now, he's making this stuff up.
Sure.
But as soon as he does that, what do you think the other parent does?
Oh, well, then they start to be a little more honest about their own.
Bam. So it's emotional reciprocity. And and we tell people, if you're in sales or if you're in leadership, you've got to go first. Whether it's with your prospects, if you're in sales, or if it's with your subordinates, if you're in leadership, you got to go first. And so we teach people how to tell that personal story of authenticity with struggle and with a resolution. And that's the second story in the seller's inventory. They have to have down in 90 seconds. The third one, so there's one each of the company and personal. The next one, you could have dozens because they're customer hero stories. And it's those peer stories. And you have to have a peer story in your pocket for every targeted buyer persona you want to sell to. That way, if you're 28 years old, you can talk to a 48-year-old.
One of the things that I've struggled with a little bit when it comes to authenticity is this idea of we've convinced, or a lot of people have convinced salespeople that the last thing they want to be or to even tell a prospect is that they're a salesperson, right? This crazy idea, and people come up with the most bizarre titles, to anything that's not sales, and yet the prospect / customer knows you're a salesperson. So, I mean, you're not fooling anybody, right, to begin with. So how can you start off with any level of authenticity if if somebody has drilled into you that whatever you do, don't let them know you're a salesperson?
Well, you make a very good point. And one of the questions we ask our audience is, I say, how many of you grew up where you had a mother and your mother wanted you to grow up and be a salesperson? Nobody ever puts their hands up.
Exactly.
They want you to be a doctor or a lawyer. So in the 80s, I got to be known as the first person who figured out how to teach engineers how to sell. And engineers typically aren't natural human connectors.
Sure.
Right? They like black and white and one right answer for everything, and lists and analytical. And I got hired by a company whose product was so complex that 100% of their salespeople were engineers. They were all chemical engineers because their product was this complex thing that allowed chemical companies and oil companies to simulate a pilot plant instead of having to build one, saving them millions of dollars. But these guys were struggling. And the first thing we had to do was reframe what selling was, because to them, selling was a dirty thing. They had shame about it. The buyers were, also, wary of being taken by a salesperson. And so we had to change their internal definition of selling from convincing, persuading, overcoming resistance, closing, to helping your customer solve a problem that you are really good at helping them solve. Using your product, your expertise, your services, because engineers love to solve problems. And so it's really an attitudinal thing.
Yeah.
I'm here to find out, in essence, if you've got any area in your life or your work where I might be able to help you, and you basically have to make me earn it. If you're not absolutely convinced, if I ever ask you for money, that you're not going to make 10 times what I ask you for, don't buy from me.
Right.
And it's, you know what I mean? It's an attitudinal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is I've told them for years, I say, change the title on your business card from sales engineer, consulting engineer, whatever, you know, crazy title they're trying to disguise the mission being sales, to buying facilitator.
Right. There you go.
Because people hate to feel sold, but they love to buy. Even men like to buy things. Buying is fun because you're taking action to satisfy one of your own needs. And honest to God, only a few people over the years have done it. But when you hand somebody a card and they look at it and say buying facilitator, that's an icebreaker.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Now, if everybody does it, then it won't be.
Yeah. Well, when everybody does it, you can go back to sales.
You come up with something else creative.
For sure.
But I mean, whatever it is, don't think it's a ticket for life, because it's not.
Yeah. Now, this has been great conversation, Mike. It's been really fascinating. Can you tell the listeners and viewers how can they find out more about you?
Well, the easiest way is MikeBosworth.com.
Mm-hmm. And as I said at the outset, you know, Mike has, I hope you don't mind me saying, Mike has been around a long time, highly respected.
It's true.
Highly respected, but always evolving. I think that's fair to say. Everything you've done, you've gone from obviously solution selling to storytelling to everything else. So continually evolving.
And I'm having a blast.
All right. Well, listen, thanks very much, Mike. It was great talking with you today. Again, this is John Golden doing our expert interview series for SalesPOP Magazine and Pipeliner CRM.